HR Famous is brought to you by HRU Tech, a contingent staffing firm specializing in engineering, IT, and technically related placements across multiple industries. If you're looking for technical talent or searching for a career, look no further than HRU Tech. Find them online at hrutech.com and call them today. HR Famous is also brought to you by Kinetics, the leading RPO recruiting firm for growth companies, named by HRO Today as the top midsize RPO provider. Kinetics uses its unique skill-based recruiter model to deliver on RPO engagements, allowing them to customize scope to meet your unique hiring needs. If you have recruiting challenges and want to consider RPO as a solution, give Kinetics a call. Find them online at kineticshr.com. What up, folks? Chris Dunn, CHRO at Kinetics. It's the HR Famous podcast. Happy to be joined as always by the one, the only Jessica Lee. JLee, what's up?
You know, hanging out, trying to make sure that as we chat, my phone doesn't go off, all the message. No one wants to hear that.
You lock the door so you're safe from any evildoers that might come in and request your time. That's good. Also, I'm sure as you do daily, before I bring Tim Sackett in, I'm sure you're just doing things that naturally increase engagement across your team and your company. That's just kind of what you do.
Oh, well,
Am I right?
That's what you're supposed to do as a leader. You want people engaged.
That's your tagline, increasing engagement even when I'm not trying. Jessica Lee, ladies and gentlemen, also joined by somebody who can destroy engagement at the drop of a hat, Mr. Tim Sackett.
Hey.
Timmy, what's up?
JLee came with a game face on today. I wish, at some point we'll be like Joe Rogan and we'll, have this thing, video, audio, everybody, and then they get to see you with
like my appearance today. I'm not even qualified to go to the store right now.
Well,
but the thing is, you put a mask on, no one knows who you are. So you can go to the store.
Yeah, and I go with the big mask to cover up more of it. All right, HR Famous podcast. We got two things for you today. I'm excited about both of them. I'm excited about one more than the other. One, they're both kind of talent related. If you expand your mind, dear listeners of the HR Famous podcast, we're going to kick it off with the concept. It's talent related. Remember, the concept of marrying up. So you're in a marriage and you evaluate the man, the wife, the partners, whatever combination you want to put together, who's more attractive. And if it's not equal, that means that somebody has, quote unquote, married up. And I'm going to intro it with this, and then I'm going to go to our resident expert on being the subject of marrying up, not the person that married up. It's Jessica Lee. I'm going to go to her because the three of us were having a text conversation, and I had seen something on the interwebs. John Krasinski, Jim from The Office, is married to Emily Blunt, and I just put it out to my honor guard. I was like, did John Krasinski, which again, Jim from The Office, did he marry up when he married Emily Blunt, an actor? Tim and I were talking before we started. Edge of Tomorrow, Devil Wears Prada. Anything else you want to point out, Tim, before I bring JLee in? What else?
Girl on the Train was amazing. She's got a really long list of movies.
Mary Poppins.
Okay. Haven't seen that one. Familiar with the backstory. So, JLee, come in here. Let's just start. We're gonna slice and dice this a little bit. This is more than an intro because these are important topics that America and really the world needs to know more about. What do you see? Did John Krasinski marry up?
John Krasinski most definitely married up. But what I would like to say is that there are multiple dimensions that one must consider on this topic of marrying up. In the land of celebrities, maybe a lot of this is related to the outward appearance, aesthetic success. But I will say, in regular life where we all live, when it comes to marrying up, there are other factors to consider. And the thing that actually comes to mind is I do think my husband married up. But I also think in some ways I married up because my credit score was crap when we first met. And he sometimes will remind me, like, you remember when we had that like fight because like we realized how bad your credit was, and I'm still with you now. So, you know, we could look at this a lot of different ways. But John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, he definitely married up.
Okay, so JLee, take a stance. We'll come back to some of maybe the other marrying up components, like economics. Before I go to Tim Sackett, give me your numbers. So scale 1 out of 10. Tell me what Emily Blunt is, and then tell me what John Krasinski is, Jim from The Office.
Okay, so people change over time. And I would have said initially that she's an 8, but I actually think she's an 8.5. And because you have not seen Mary Poppins, you can't fully appreciate my 0.5 bump I've given her, because not only is she beautiful, a great actress, but I was shocked at how good of a singer she was in Mary Poppins. So I'm like, wow, multifaceted. That also impacts her earning potential, ability to, you know, maybe get a Tony Award in addition to other things. So I give her an 8.5. And I think Mr. Krasinski, he's somewhere in a 6.5 to 7 range for me. I did take a moment to see, you know, him in The Office versus like Some Good News during this COVID period versus him being Jack Ryan. And I still can't give him more than a 7. He's still too much of a like, you know, oh, I'm a nice guy next door, I'm your buddy. And just, I don't think he's that hot. Whereas Emily Blunt is hot. It's
not Jim from The Office or even the recent versions of John Krasinski, Tim, not doing it for JLee. So it's a delta of 2 is what JLee has. I'm quoting her at the 6.5 because she was hedging it to 7, and it was lower than that when we talked via text. Tim, what do you got? Who married up? What are the numbers?
Oh, for sure, John married up. Like Emily Blunt in Edge of Tomorrow. Like we were like this is the Tom Cruise flick where she's just a badass. Like I could watch that thing 100 times. I probably have watched it 100 times. Underrated flick for sure. If you like those kinds of flicks. John, Office. Like you could put a mask on KD right now with his backwards hat and his hoodie. You could put a mask on John. They're both walking through a Publix in Orlando, Florida, and you wouldn't know the difference. They would be the same dude, right? So
I appreciate the 6.5 for me. Thanks. That's awesome.
I'm at a 6 with John. Sorry, and Emily at an 8. So the delta of 2 I think is about where it's at now. Again, Katie, we've talked about this on the text stream. My first reaction was every dude marries up, and then I'm like, well, I mean that's the way it should be. Like you should, you know. But the reality is, we know there's some gold digger stuff out there, so it's not necessarily the case.
Okay, hold on. So I'm going to come back to there are rules about how you refer to who married up. I want to come to that in a second because those are important to understand.
Where are you at?
Jay,
with your rating?
Where am I at?
Your rating.
Oh crap! I just went right into when we were texting. I was judging you. I don't think I ever went to my numbers.
Now you have to throw them out there.
I love Jim from The Office. So I'm growing up straight up 7 versus 8.
Wow.
My delta is not as big. And also, too, John Krasinski has tried to improve, like the guy next door
image,
like look and feel. Like he's got the black beard now, or he did at least during the John Ryan stuff. Whatever. So JLee, I'm coming back to you. So my delta is 1. I think it's a marry up situation. What was it with Jenna Fischer? On The Office versus John Krasinski. Shout out, by the way, to Jenna Fischer. Pam from The Office is a alum of my undergraduate university, Truman State University in Missouri. Shout out Jenna Fischer, but JLee's getting ready to take you down, Jenna. Go ahead, JLee. What's the numbers?
We are talking about them as a couple in The Office. There's like a 6-6. I think they're equal. I think they're equals there.
It was
I believe you are matched.
Was it a perfect
Good
workplace couple, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Tim, you agree with that?
I do, yeah. I think it's a good example of the every workplace kind of couple.
Okay, so there are rules about marrying up. Tim, I'm going to come to you first because you share this rule along with me. The first rule of talking about who married up is the guy in the relationship always says, Tim, has to say that he, in fact, did marry up. That's the first rule of this club. Am I right, Tim?
First rule of marriage club, if you don't want to be divorced.
Tell us more, Tim. How have you stayed married all these years?
No, well, and again, I always felt like I was marrying up. Like I met this like college athlete, Jewish girl. You know, she was going to be like a medical professional, like super smart, straight A's. I was just like literally like, you know, bumping around Wyoming, like with a 3.0 GPA, playing volleyball and trying not to drink myself to death. And like, oh, I definitely married up. But then 10, 20 years down the road, I'm like, wait a minute. She married up. Come on, let's be honest.
Shots fired. I didn't think we'd get that out of you. JLee, so with Bobby, the rule you've seen with Bobby and his friends is no one from an attractiveness perspective in a relationship will refer to their partner, especially guys like Tim and I, heterosexual relationship. Okay. We're like framing it that way. The guy in the heterosexual relationship never says that he married down from an attractiveness perspective. Am I right?
That's 100% correct.
Maybe in divorce court, they might say that.
Okay. However, JLee, the woman has the right to say that they, in fact, did marry down. That's just part of the rules. Am I correct?
Well, it's all in the framing. You would never say you married down. You would only say he married up.
Good. That is framing. That's the framing that makes the relationship work.
Right there. Good comms work.
Yeah.
Anything else from the female perspective, JLee, about marrying up, marrying down? I think now's a good time to talk about some of the other factors because, I think...
Yeah, the other factors.
The other factors, economics, emotional stability, yin to your yang. There's a lot of stuff that makes a relationship a little more equal, right?
Correct. So I will only use myself as an example. I owned no real estate. I was a renter. I had no savings. My credit score was crap.
This is wonderful.
So in that regard, I didn't have a car. Like I had nothing that I brought to the table except for being fun. And actually, as a matter of fact, Mr. Chun he didn't even think I had a career because he's like, what kind of person goes to the club on the weeknights? Like, who are you? So he didn't even think I had a career.
Hey, by the way, a lot of people don't know that Bobby was a DJ. Also, he's a nuclear pharmacist. Like he's super brilliant, but also a DJ. You met him in the club as a DJ, right? So you probably thought like this dude's just a DJ.
Well, so we had friends in common. So I knew he had like a day job and like, he was smart and all of that.
So you were gold digging a little.
Oh, of course not. No, I knew my worth and my potential. I have always known my worth and my potential. My bank accounts did not reflect that. So and I was just spending more on alcohol and clothes to go wear to the club. Like my investments were in different things. So that is something he brought to the table. Another dimension is like family. Like I think in some way, I know a lot. I think I married up because of family. Like my family's dysfunctional. He's got like this big, like wonderful family. And that's another dimension.
Hey, by the way, if you want to hear JLee break down her family, I'll throw it in the show notes. We did a best hire ever.
We sure
on
did.
How JLee grew up and how she arrived at where she is. It's one of my most listened to podcasts over at Best Hire Ever. I'll throw that in the show notes, JLee. That was a good one. I learned a lot about
JLee's family. They're active listeners. They probably, that's all those listens you got over at Best Hire Ever.
Actually, you know what it was is like it got picked up like as a media blip inside my company. So people were like, "Hey, I heard your podcast. That was fun." No, those are like the primary dimensions. I think. Like I wouldn't add any others. Yeah.
JLee, so I'll start with you. What's the biggest gap that can exist from an attractiveness perspective? And if it's infinite, that's fine. But what's the biggest gap that can exist from an attractiveness perspective in a relationship for it to last long term?
By the way, people are going to say that we are so superficial and like this podcast.
Get over it. We're having fun.
They're going to say you guys are ignorant, superficial, how rude. We are talking about it from a very hetero perspective. So I recognize that. But I think the gap is probably 2 to 3. 2, I think 2 is really it. Like, I don't think the gap should be greater than 2 is my honest answer. But maybe you could get away with 3. People evolve over time. You can get Botox and get a little nip tuck here and there and fix your teeth and things like that. And then it makes a difference.
Yeah. Tim?
Hey, this is William Tincup. Listen, we did a series for iSolved called Heroes of HR, where we talk to HR practitioners. And these are just your run-of-the-mill, everyday, slogging it out, 300 employees in Cedar Rapids, HR pros. Mostly it's centered around iSolved and what they do with iSolved, but also they talk a lot about kind of the day-to-day rigor of HR. If you're curious about that, search for Heroes of HR wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
What's the max number?
I think it takes a really special person to marry a fixer-upper, right? Like either way, male or female, like you have to have some real big insight to, hey, I think this person is like a diamond in the rough kind of thing. So I would agree. I think, 2 is that. It was funny. We were going back on this text string as my wife and my older son was in the kitchen making dinner. And Keaton, my oldest son, was like, he immediately said 2 before we even asked the question. He was like, yeah, it can't be more than 2.
Interesting conversation. All right, we're gonna turn it to another topic, and we're not gonna like tease this one in the podcast title with just the Capitol riots and everything went on with that. However, both Tim and I, and JLee, you could participate in this anytime you want. But Tim and I got reached out to. I know we got quoted in HR Executive talking about, hey, how do HR leaders handle stuff that is employee involved with things like the Capitol riots? And, there was a set of questions. I saw what Tim said. I participated in another one with another publication. And it really comes down to the fact when bad stuff happens with employees, and it's very public, and there's a lot of public opinion about it that polarizes people in a lot of different ways. What do you do, and how do you deal with an employee who's involved in an event? And by the way, this can take a lot of different scenarios, but it really comes down to how do you deal with the employee in that situation that's somewhere in the middle of something, and opinion inside the company may be pretty fierce. Do you automatically term? Do you not? And JLee, one of the questions was beyond just legal considerations, what type of ethical and cultural considerations do HR leaders need to think about if they learn that they had an employee in the middle of something like that with Capitol riots? Tim, so JLee can think a little bit. I'll turn it over to you. Reaction to that was the first thing that came to your mind. You were quoted in that article. What do they need to consider?
I think, again, we want to espouse to having, a really inclusive work environment, which means we want people of all ilk, right, to come in. That could be conservative views, liberal views, independent views, whatever that might be politically. Everything, right? And so just because somebody goes to a protest, whether that is a liberal protest or conservative protest, is really meaningless. That should be a non-blip on the HR scale. It's when you have evidence that they're actively involved in illegal activity, which then starts to rise up to something. Now, again, Katie, I'll share a story. So at the Capitol protest riot, thing that happened, I don't even know what we're calling it. Everyone's calling it something different. Anyways, insurrection. We had a former employee who took his elderly father, wanted to go down, see President Trump talk. And he posted a picture on Facebook of him and his dad smiling with the entire kind of mall behind him. Right. And that was it. And I come in, what day did that happen? That was on a Wednesday. I come in on Thursday to an email from an anonymous person saying your employee was at the protest or at the Capitol, whatever, and you need to fire them. And I was like, so we started doing evidence and looking, and like he wasn't, no, he literally took his elderly followers just to stand there to listen to the Trump speech and went home. And they were like, no, if he was a part of this, you know, if he went down there at all, then he should be fired. But by the way, it was a former employee, but he hadn't updated his LinkedIn. So they thought he still worked for us. And he happened to live in the Maryland, you know, kind of DC area, and just took his dad down there. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, is that where we're at in society, that somebody couldn't just be there? And then all of a sudden now somebody thinks they should be fired. Like, I was amazed by that.
I wasn't amazed because I think it's shades of gray, right? I think anytime something happens with an employee and there's opinion framed around that, and it could be like world events or something that happens internally that's very public, I think people can be attached to that. And it's so many shades of gray, JLee, that you have to wade through that, and you have to figure out what's right for the company and also what's right and fair for that employee. We're going to talk about professional conduct policies in just a second. But JLee, I see all these shades of gray, and it's never easy because even if you have something very minor, the opinion forms around it and there's still all this pressure, and it makes finding the right decision hard. Right, JLee?
Yeah. And like part of the shades of gray is also like what makes this hard is also like, can you use the riots and insurrection that happened and compared to I'm just going to use an analogy of like the Women's March 4 years ago. And so like to have absolutes around like how to think about it and how to approach it might not be, you know, as easy because I don't know that it was the same. So there's a lot of gray around it. And like the other thing, I have wondered about it is, like, does it matter the level or role that the person has in your company? You know, like if it's the CEO or if it's an HR person or if it's, I don't know, someone else, like, does that play a factor? Like, is that, you know, something that's worth consideration? So that's another area of gray. And just the other thing that is part of this is like, I've actually been following, and I haven't yet really decided how I feel. Like people know the term doxing, and I think it happens in a lot of different, you know, types of situations. But
define that term for us real quick, just to make sure everybody knows what you're referring to.
Yeah, so I think doxing is the act of trying to out a person on social media because of something that they've done. So like there's like Twitter accounts, Instagram accounts right now, like, and I'm following some of them called like homegrown terrorists or out the terrorists, and they're like posting photos and trying to collect information and crowdsource, and they've turned it into also helping the FBI you know, to identify people. But you know, the idea of doxing as a part of all this is, I mean, it's just an interesting one. We live in a completely different time and age now where like you've got that activity as a part of it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, that's why the job of an HR leader, Tim mentioned his situation. I think there were hundreds, if not thousands, well, probably not thousands, but certainly 100 plus HR leaders had stuff coming back to them related to involvement. You know, what, you know, kind of what I like, how I break this down is just related to what happened in the Capitol that day. Were they around low-level demonstrations? Did they attend the Trump rally at the White House? Did they march with the crowd to the Capitol? Did they protest outside the Capitol? Did they enter the building? Like, there's all these different levels. I don't know the right answers. I just know it's a bunch of shades of gray, and the answers are never easy, which kind of brings me, maybe the last thing to talk about with this is I've always been, for a decade plus, I'm a huge proponent for, I'm aging myself now, but for a couple of decades, I'm a huge proponent. You have to have a professional conduct policy in your manual, in your employee manual, and it's really there to give you the latitude you need to make the right call, because the vast majority of employees are employment at will. However, you have to have some type of logic related to giving them a reason that you're terming them. And a good professional conduct policy, you know, talks about, like, it's just broad language that, you know, talks about what's acceptable, not only in the company, but outside the company. So the company can say that, hey, your actions outside the company, could deem that your behavior and your conduct make it impossible for the company to move forward with you from an employment decision like perspective. And I think that there's different names for it, but I think that professional conduct policy, if you don't have it, the events of the last couple of weeks tell you probably need one, because you can still do whatever you want, but certainly it helps in any type of legal proceeding. When you made a tough employment call across all these shades of gray, you've got to have that type of policy,
I mean, I
right,
think
Tim?
if you don't, again, it just puts you at, a little bit more risk. And I think everything we've seen over the last 12 months, I think even perpetuates it more to go out and say, hey, if you have one, you might want to pull it back out, take a look at it for 2021. Because not only do we have, the social justice stuff and the things, the insurrection at the Capitol. By the way, we're going to have vaccine issues that come into play as well, right? You're going to have employees who are going to go out publicly, privately, want the vaccine, not want the vaccine, try to come to work without the vaccine. Like, there's still other issues at play when we come into professional conduct that are going to happen and continue to happen.
Yeah. JLee, anything to add to that?
It's like there's no reason not to have a professional conduct policy. Like, is what it comes down to. Like, I can't imagine there's any reason not to. So prudent to like have yourself covered.
Yeah. And make sure that the language says that you're responsible from a professional conduct policy with what you do outside the company. Like, we're all accountable to that. Like, in this world, we were before, and certainly with everything going on with social media, doxing, and all of the eyes that are on everything, you just need that flexibility. Hey, I'll get us out of here. One last example of how hard this is. And Tim, check me on this. You and I were talking about this earlier this week. Github, right, Tim? There's a Business Insider article on the premium version about GitHub, and they had a Jewish employee that was referring roughly, Tim, check me on this, just on company communication channels to saying that the Nazis.
Yeah, be careful, everybody. The Nazis are about, like in the DC area, right?
And one thing led to another, and a day later, or a couple days later, the employee was terminated. And, the hard part about this is we don't know all the circumstances. That's what the money is for that HR leader, to figure out who this person is, what the history is, and what the behavior was beyond that simple posting. You might say, hey, given the circumstances, that posting out there, is that enough? A lot of people would say no. Some people might say yes, but it always comes down in all these shades of gray to the entire set of circumstances and you doing the best you can as an HR leader. And it's incredible hard. Any final words, like with that story in mind, JLee, and then I'll throw it to Tim and we'll get out of here.
Only that, like, this is the hard stuff, like, as you're saying about being in HR, like, this is the hard stuff. And like, you think about people who want to get into this space or want to, be in a leadership level role. And like, this is the hard stuff you got to figure out how to deal with. And you're not going to be everyone's best friend. And you're never going to make everyone happy at the end of the day.
No, Jay, I think you're completely right. And I think sometimes we feel like sellouts to ourselves because you're like, look, I also feel this way, right? Like maybe I felt like everybody that was in the mall was, a Nazi or whatever, right? Like this GitHub thing. But the reality is you have to take this kind of centered role, this moderate middle role for the good of the company, the good of the organization. I continue to hear people go, no, HR is about protecting the employee and protecting the people in your company and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's not really. We love to say that about ourselves, but it's about protecting the organization, the company. By the way, that's every single person's role in the organization. That's why you're hired and being paid, is to protect and prosper the organization, not yourself. And that becomes a really hard thing, I think, for that new HR person that's like, no, I carry the flag this way and I'm going to make sure we carry it all the way. And you're like, no, that can't be the case because that's being exclusive, not inclusive.
Yeah. And by the way, I'll say this, it's like I'll end on a heavy point and then I'll lighten it up a little bit. The reality is most organizations look a lot like America. So from a political perspective, it's still if it's not 50-50, it's one side, it's the other, and it's a bunch of moderates in the middle. And the reality is, in any of these like professional conduct calls, you can't satisfy. You're basically the equivalent of a politician in your organization, because you will never make a decision that satisfies everyone. All you can do is make the best decision you can, play on, look in the mirror, and all of that. I'll end with this. JLee, Tim basically said in our earlier segment, he said I was a 6. Did you catch that? He said, yeah, John's a 6. You and he could be walking in. Nobody knows the difference. You're a 6, KD. Thank you, Timmy.
Exactly.
Above average.
Above average. I got that going for me. And apparently, as I've already shown what Miss has done, has the capability, in a multidimensional way, to marry up from an attractiveness perspective, because I bring other things to the table, JLee. Did you catch how I brought all that together? That's the way it is. All right, HR famous. He's Tim Sackett. He's a 5.5. She's JLee. Much higher than that, I might say, without giving you a specific number. Much, much higher on the scale. I'm Chris Dunn. I'm a 6. I'm walking through the grocery store. Nobody can tell. Until next time, we are out.